All right, this video is for continuing on with motivation at work, and it is extending beyond the idea of flow. So we are talking about industrial organizational psychology, and IO psychology, as it's nicknamed, is a branch of psychology that is not really very well known. People don't really understand what the heck it does, it's something that is actually an area of psychology that is vastly growing. It's on the rise. So I wanted to be able to talk about IO psychology in the essence of how it works within the idea of motivation and motivation to work. So first of all, there's kind of two separate divisions of IO. You can talk about personnel psychology and you can talk about the organizational psychology. So to start off with, the personnel psychologists help businesses actually choose and assess employees. They're the ones that are actually going out and figuring out who should be the best person, who's the best fit for this particular job. Okay, so who is the best person for this? They do ID people's strengths, and then they match them to the work that fits. And so when they're interviewing candidates, they may interview candidates for a particular position and recognize that, hey, they are really good at, organizing and motivating people, and this other person over here is really good as a follower, right? So they can follow the rules and they can follow the instructions to a T. Okay, we need both kinds of people in an organization, but the personnel psychologist's job is to basically find the best fit for each person's personality. So, for example, this one says, your personality test shows strong masochistic tendency, exactly what we are looking for in an employee, right? So they're looking for, obviously, somebody that is, willing to, because I think that it's a cop or a parole officer or somebody, so somebody who's interested in that kind of a thing, right? Interviews are also used within personnel psychology to determine, obviously, when you're interviewing somebody for a job, trying to determine who is the best person to hire. But it's funny because interviewers often think that their judgment is best to determine who to hire. This is called this is called the interviewer illusion. But the problem is that that's not truly who that person is, right? So when you go into interview, you are presenting your best self. So like this guy here, he has a trimmed haircut, he's clean shaven, nice smile, looks very confident, very formal attire, firm handshake, good body posture. All of those things are really good and it makes a good impression. And the problem is that interviewers oftentimes base their judgment just on how you do in that interview, whereas there can be a lot of people that can fool you based off from just presenting a good front. So better idea is within those interviews to take a look at how are we interviewing them? So we can now talk about structured or unstructured interviews. So unstructured interviews provide clues to somebody's personality, but not necessarily their actions in different situations. These are usually very open-ended questions, and they're very vague. So, you get the general question of, so tell me about yourself. It doesn't really give you an idea of how they're going to react in a particular situation. How are they going to behave? How are they going to treat this job? Okay, it gives you an idea of what are they like as an individual, but that's about it. However, structured interviews determine people's strengths and includes questions about how to handle specific situations. This is for example, where it says, describe a situation when you showed amazing speed of thought and self-control in the face of persistent and irrelevant questioning. Okay, that's not exactly a structured interview, but I'll give you, for instance, I once was interviewing for this job, and it was supposed to be a technology assistant in a school, and so I was kind of at that point where I was looking for, a possibility of, I don't know if I want to continue teaching, and I was looking at different options. So this interview was talking about, okay, some of the jobs, some of the things that they would have you do. So they were saying, okay, one of the things that they gave me was, they gave me a list of, I think it was like 8 items. These are typical tasks that you would have to do in this job. Okay, how would you prioritize these 8 items? And so they gave me a list of several different things, and they said, okay, which one would you tackle first, second, third, etc., and give me a reason why. So that's a much better example of a structured interview, because that's a typical thing that you would have to do in that particular position. Structured interviews are much better at predicting performance than unstructured interviews, because obviously you're giving them scenarios that actually would typically happen in that particular job. You can also talk about personnel psychology also deals with what we call 360-degree feedback. This is something that personnel psychology really stresses. When you are evaluating the performance of somebody once they are actually hired, okay, you should get feedback not only from your immediate supervisor, but others as well. For example, you should have feedback from your peers. What do your peers think of how you're doing? You should get feedback from your customers. You should get feedback from your boss, obviously, but also self-determination, right? What do you think? Okay, how are things going for you? Okay, so keep in mind that there's all of that will be a better balanced assessment, whereas there could be a lot of times where maybe you just don't get along with your boss, and your boss really does hate you, so they give you negative feedback. Right? And they give you a negative evaluation. But if you are getting 360-degree feedback, you're getting it from all ends of the spectrum. And so if everybody's telling you, yeah, we don't like how you do things, then yeah, maybe then you should change stuff. The other part of IO psychology is industrial organizational psychologists. So the organizational psychologists are going to be the ones that will actually look at the environment and the management and how that influences workers' motivation and productivity. The personnel psychologists, they were working with individual people, making sure they're in the right job, making sure they're getting good feedback. Organizational psychologists is looking at the environment and the management. Okay, so what environment are you working in? For some people and for some scenarios, this kind of a thing where all the walls are made of glass and there's like literally no privacy, that is productive for them. Okay, and it depends upon what the particular particular job is. I can tell you I've worked in a couple of different schools, and the first school that I worked at was one of these open concept schools where it was kind of in pods, and so there's these, basically they had the main building of the school, which was a nice square, but then they had these offshoots that were circles, and they had basically rooms that were inside the circle that had walls, but then all the way around the outside of the circle, the classrooms had no walls. So what happened is that you were using bookcases and partitions and things like that to basically subdivide this area going all the way around the outside of the circle into individual classrooms. Okay, now that meant, if you think about this, I had no door to my classroom. There was no door. There wasn't even like a full wall separating my classroom from the hallway. Think about that. How productive do you suppose this is going to be for high school students to learn? Yeah, as you might imagine, this is just crazy. It was just crazy, and it was terrible because anytime anybody walked by the hallway, students were distracted. It was terrible. It was absolutely terrible. And as well as, imagine, how much you can hear right now from other classrooms by, having my door open, or, if they're just naturally really loud, class or teacher next door. This had no walls. So as a result, you could hear every single class all the way around. Okay? That's what we're talking about with environment. Now, we can also talk about the manager's influence. So the manager does have a lot of influence as far as over the workers' motivation and how productive they are. The manager's belief about employees' motivations affect their tasks that they're given. It affects the participation of the employees in decisions, as well as the incentives they're giving to employees. So you could talk about this idea of theory X versus theory Y. This is a common thing to pop up, by the way, on the AP test. So theory X is the idea that I believe that all of my employees are, I'm assuming that they are all extrinsically motivated. And so, in other words, the reason that they work at my business is because for money. That's it. They're motivated by money. So as a whole, I view my employees as basically lazy. They're prone to a lot of errors. They're motivated by money. So because of that, the tasks I'm going to give them are very simple. I got to make sure I monitor them a lot because they don't know what the hell they're doing. And I got to provide them incentives to produce more. So I got to give them more money to get them to do more. Okay. Whereas theory Y, okay, theory Y people assumes that employees like work. They like, they're intrinsically motivated. They are working for beyond the idea of money. If you remember, we looked at the idea of, is it a job, is it a profession, or is it a vocation? Theory Y assumes that you are in that vocation or professional category, right? So theory Y says that people are, trying to go and help their self-esteem. They like creativity, they like responsibility, and they can direct themselves. So because of that, okay, theory Y managers are going to give their workers a lot more tasks that are going to involve a lot more creativity, a lot more openness, and a lot more self-direction. Okay, they will welcome employees to participate in decision making. Okay, it's not that theory Y is not going to provide rewards, but they feel that managers that believe in theory Y believe that you're going to be more motivated by doing a good job than necessarily being paid more. I mean, you'll get paid, but that's not the premise of it. Okay, so lastly, the leadership style. Leadership style of the manager will also influence the workers. So you could talk about a task leadership, and you could talk about social leadership. So task leadership, you are going to have somebody that leaders, and you can have, by the way, managers that are really good at task leadership, and then you can have other managers that are good at social leadership. So task leadership are those leaders and those managers that are really good at setting standards and organizing. And I show this picture of these ants because this ant on the top is, our leader, and it's giving directions as much as ants can to the other ants. And okay, this is what we're going to do. We're going to get this log across this gap here, and all of us are going to get across, right? And so it gives you specific things to do and organizing things. Whereas social leadership, okay, is making those connections, explaining decisions, working out conflicts. Okay, I hear that you are having a problem with this other employee. What can we do to fix that? And sitting down, and they're going to be much more responsive, okay? Now, you need both types of leaders, and in a very, very, very special, wonderful, awesome manager, they're going to be good at both. Are you going to have a manager that is good at both all the time? No. Okay, and you have to start to recognize that you need both. Okay, so while some people may not like task leadership, they get the job done. And some people feel like social leadership, what do we need that for? Well, you need your workers to be able to work together, be able to get it done. And so both sides are really important. All right, that's all I wanted to talk about. That is about IO psychology. Keep in mind personnel psychologists versus organizational psychologists. Let me know if you have any questions.